All right, we're live.
First, I'd like to thank my opponent for being here at this very important debate. I'd like to thank you for coming to this very important debate.
Thanks. Yeah. Can you begin by first just introducing yourself, your name, college, year, and what you're running for?
Hi, I'm Jonas. I am a first year from Oaks, and I am currently running for the SUA representative for Oaks College.
Woo! Why are you running for this position?
Because I really like Oaks, and I think that Oaks deserves someone who can represent them efficiently. And I think that in my experiences working in student government, of being involved with a lot of activities at Oaks, I think that I can effectively represent Oaks' interests on the SUA and in other student government offices, etc., etc.
Woo, yeah.
How will you bring Oaks' values of communicating diversity through a just society to SUA?
Well, I think that at Oaks we really show how we really show the theme of communicating diversity by supporting organizations and students who feel like they're what they identify as isn't represented effectively. We could bring that by bringing that to the SUA, showing that hey, these groups, these people who have their own identities aren't feeling like they're being represented in student government, aren't feeling like they have their own little spaces where they could feel like themselves in UC Santa Cruz, and I feel like we should be able to accommodate them, given the ways that we've done so in Oaks College itself, by communicating, by sort of sharing our own personal identities, where we came from. Oaks is kind of like a cesspool of people who come from different backgrounds, people who come from different maybe there's they didn't come from privileged backgrounds, maybe they came from a history of abuse or negligence, and I think that we should really be able to bring those people up, have them be represented in student government, because it's really the only way for them to feel like they actually have a place in UC Santa Cruz.
A large percentage of Oaks students live off campus. How will you make sure that their voices are heard, and how you outreach to them?
Right, so for me, next year I will be living off campus myself. So a big concern for me was, how am I gonna be involved with Oaks Senate still? How will I be notified of the different events that are gonna be happening at Oaks College? And I feel like we really have to be pushing for a large social media campaign, a large physical visitation. The best way to really reach to someone is to actually talk to them up front, person to person. And I feel like we should really make an effort to try and reach out to our students who live off campus, because they are just as important to this Oaks community as the people who live in the residence halls, as the people who live in the apartments. So I think that by using just general person up front, close interactions, as well as pushing for a strong social media campaign, I think we can really get those who live off campus involved with the events that we have at Oaks College.
And what's your favorite thing about Oaks?
For me, even though we're geographically far from everyone, I think we make up for it with a very strong community. I've never had a bad experience here at Oaks. I really feel like everyone really genuinely cares for one another, and I hope that, and I really don't want to see that go away. So I want to do my best to try and support that community. I think that Oaks deserves a space where they can feel safe, a space where they can feel like their opinions actually have merit, that their opinions are actually validated, that they actually have value, that they can contribute to something. So I think that Oaks really has a lot to offer, and I think that they should really have more representation in student government spaces and student government itself.
What are some of your past experiences that made you eligible for this position?
So since my fall quarter entering UC Santa Cruz, I did get involved with Oaks Senate almost immediately. I've been in Oaks Senate as far as I can remember coming to Santa Cruz. In winter quarter, I was appointed as an alternate Oaks representative on the Student Union Assembly, so I've attended a few meetings. I kind of know a little bit about what happens in the SUA, and in the first week of February, I was appointed to be the Oaks rep for the student committees, so I do have quite a bit of experience in student government. I have been involved in almost all of the activities that happen here at Oaks, so I think that I'm a pretty well-rounded person that can really contribute to student government on behalf of Oaks.
And if you had to identify one issue that Oaks is affected by, what would it be and how would you fix it?
I think that just based off of our location, we aren't really given access to a lot of the different amenities that other students have. For instance, we don't really have access to health, wellness, recreational activities that are happening all on the east side of campus, and I think that we should really make an effort to make sure that Oaks students, even though they're far away from a lot of the different amenities on campus, that they should have equal access to different activities. So a way we can do that is having student-run wellness activities such as pilots yoga, Zumba. I think all of those don't really have to be led by like instructors, they could be led by students. I think students are fully capable of doing that themselves. And I think that, you know, if administration or if UC Santa Cruz itself isn't really able to provide for us, then I think that we should be able to take the initiative and provide for ourselves in the ways that only we can.
What are some concrete things you want to do if you were to get SUA rep next year?
Right, so I really think that Oaks College itself is a kind of a little neglected. In fall quarter in November, actually, someone actually was taken hostage and was brought to Oaks, and they were held, I believe, at knife point. They entered one of the buildings here. They stole some things, and nothing was really mentioned. And I was kind of disappointed in that actual students, like their lives were at risk, and yet all we got was like a very vague police report. And one of my residents actually came up to me and said, you know, Jonas, we don't really feel that safe. We would really like to see peepholes installed into the residence hall and the apartment dorm rooms. Oaks College actually is probably the only college that doesn't have that in our buildings. And they came to me, they said they wanted to start a petition, and I was like the senator that sort of represented them in that initiative. So we were able to put peepholes as like on a list of projects. So I think that safety should be of like really big importance here at Oaks, especially since we're in the forefront of most of the colleges. We're like right in front of Westerville parking lot. We're like the first college that you run into when you come up the entrance. So I think that we should really make a big push to ensure that not only can students have a great education here, but they should also feel safe while staying here at UC Santa Cruz.
Assembly representatives rarely propose resolutions to the SUA. Do you plan to use the space to present resolutions that promote change on campus to better student life?
Absolutely, I think that's really a part of the job. For me, like I'm supposed to represent the student body of Oaks, how many thousands of students that is. So if I'm unable to like push for a resolution or an idea that my constituents want to see put up in student government, then I don't think I'm really doing my job well. So of course I would totally support whatever the student body, whatever the Oaks residents really want to see happen in student government, really want to see happen in their own spaces. So I would put forth whatever my constituents want me to put forward. I think it's my obligation as their representative, given if I were elected.
So could you, on the same question, could you name a few resolutions that you think should be brought to the SUA and you would push it to pass next year if you're to get this position?
Right, so for me, like I'm currently tabling for Measure 66. Personally, I think that's one of like the most important resolutions or measures that are currently being discussed. We should really be seeing the importance of these student governed spaces. I think that it plays a really big role in the idea of student autonomy. I believe that, you know, the only people who really know how to best run their homes are the people who actually live in them, who actually use them. And I think that we shouldn't really have to bow down to what administration thinks is best for our spaces when we're the ones who are primarily using them. So I think that one of the things that I would totally support would be Measure 66 and anything that would support the idea of student autonomy and student empowerment, like just taking control of our own lives and education instead of just having administration decide for us. I think we know what's best for us.
With the excess of students coming in next year, what will you do to mitigate the effect that it will have on us?
Right, I think that for us, like we have in our residence halls, we have mural rooms, and those are in our lounges, and soon we'll be losing those spaces to rooms, and a lot of us felt that was really disappointing. So many of our resources will be greatly stretched, and I think to help mitigate the effect of that, we should really be able to make student spaces more accessible to students. I think that, for instance, the library should be open for longer hours, like McHenry Science and Engineering should be open for 24 hours. I think that if you're going to be forcing students to leave their buildings because they don't have any other communal spaces to go to, I think we should be able to give them more access to the other spaces that are currently being limited on campus. Whether that be the library, the OLC, for instance, which isn't really open or accessible 24 hours. I think that we should make these spaces the only spaces that students can really come together and discuss things, study. I think that we should make those accessible as accessible as much as possible, especially with the influx of students coming in.
Is there any more audience questions? If there are, please come here and tell us, and we'll get them asked.
You write it down.
You can just say it, actually. Go for it.
So, UC Santa Cruz, it has received over $3 million in federal grant for becoming a Hispanic Serving Institute. What do you know about it? Are you aware of it? And how do you see SUA getting involved with that?
Personally, like I haven't really been briefed a lot. I've heard about it, like the grant that we've received. Whether or not what SUA should do with it, I will listen to what my constituents want me to do with it. I believe that my actions, like the opinion and the opinion of Oak Senate and the Oaks population will determine what my opinion will be on what we will be doing, what the SUA will be doing with this grant. And I'm glad to hear that we actually received this grant for serving Hispanic students. And I think that Oaks College, with their theme being communicating diversity, I think that we can really come up with great uses of this fund and like what we think that SUA should be doing with it.
Any more audience questions? If not,
Do you have any final comments or final statements that you'd like to say?
Oaks!
awesome. We're gonna take a few minute break, and this one's the camera here. We're just gonna take a few minute break, and then we'll come back with the VP of Academic Affairs debate.
Oh, thank you.
So well. Good luck. Some of your answers to those questions, like, I don't know how you got that out that quickly.
Impromptu speech. That's racer yeah.
I'm still impressed. You still worded them enormously well.
Yeah. The only reason it's kind of hard.
I'll give him that. I haven't even.
Or we can move this.
That's pretty cool. You have a tripod that holds you both.
It's also a so 2 in 1.
Oh, you want to be on this side?
Does it have one of the buttons?
Yes, it does. Right there in the front.
Oh, is it? How does it
Yeah, it's good online. And so it's live. I think I love it when you're on the screen. Because in the background.
Your batteries
Where is she?
I'm taking a hit. Those feel weird. I feel like
Look it up. Type in bar around UCSC and look at this picture. I look at hot finger. You have it as well. What is your profile picture and your
Just roll in order.
Academics affairs. Come speak with me.
So I'm writing. Are you really? Alright, come on, Ray. That's good. Line up the debate. Come on, girl.
Come speak with us. No. T.S. and Jeffrey, please.
Get up.
Come talk to us.
Oh, sorry. We'll do that. Hi.
If you were going to drive that one. Okay. And also, at any point in time, I know you both, so I can't find a place to say. They both don't really know you, so they're surprised. And they feel like once someone says sympathy for you, they can be like, please verify what you know. Also, what's your opinion on this? Jeffrey, what Tia said, you agree with everything else said. How would you do things differently? So, and then back. So I'm gonna make you guys talk to each other.
Okay, yeah, because I wasn't sure how this was going. We were just going to like cut into each other and get away. That sounds a lot nicer.
Right.
Like 2 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, something. We'll see. I know. We're gonna know if we feel like you're going. We'll give you 1 minute, 30 seconds. So we're trying this out, so it's not gonna be perfect. But we're trying to keep it fair. We just want it to be a little more lively. Them to see the differences of me as opposed to like I think students may or I don't think great. You guys want to shake hands?
Yeah! Where's the board? No, wait, did we stand or sit?
In a second. Please.
Sit, okay.
No?
Remember to breathe.
They're talking about
Show me your best. I'm gonna touch the camera and touch the table. Wait. Simba. Then what if we move the tables? And like, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Oh wait, too much. Go back.
Move this.
No, Simba told me I don't want to move this. Why not? I don't know. I just made them move that.
It doesn't matter.
It's like, but it's in the middle of like everyone, you know? That's good. Perfect. You guys look like you're doing like a high school newscast.
I did those, yeah. Really? Yeah. Yeah, I always liked my facts of the day.
This just in. The Weather Prediction Club says it will rain cats and dogs tomorrow.
It's actually like,
Is it ridiculous? That's good. Okay. Jeff, on to you, Jeff.
All right, we're gonna get started in a second.
if you give bad responses, I'll throw things.
Quiet down, please. So let me explain the rules again. We're gonna have the VP of Academic Affairs debate. We have me and the two commissioners for College A and Oaks. They're awesome. Give them a hand. We're gonna ask questions. We're gonna definitely drive into these questions. So we'll ask someone a question. We'll ask someone else to respond to your answer, and we'll ask the third one to respond to the response. So we're kind of gonna go with that. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3, and we'll switch up every time. So that if you start on this question, you'll, or if you start on one question, you won't on the next one. At any point in time, if the two commissioners from 8 and Oaks feel like your question was not answered, they can ask you for clarification, which means they want you to be a little more concrete with your answer. We're gonna try to just a few questions that we feel like students have been really dealing with, and we're really going to focus on those. Any questions before we get started? With timing, we're going to freehand a little bit. We'll try to keep things as even and equal as possible. We'll give you hand signs of a minute, 30 seconds, try to wrap it up, etc. And yeah, you ready? Awesome. So let's begin with, starting with TS, can we start with your name, year, what you're running for?
Okay. My name is T.S. Webster. I'm a first year. I'm affiliated with Crown, and I'm running for Vice President of Academic Affairs.
I'm Jeff. I'm a Stevenson student. I'm a first year. I'm a history major, and I am running for Vice President of Academic Affairs.
So, before anything, starting with Jeff, can you explain a little bit what it means to be the VP of Academic Affairs and what that entails?
Yeah. Well, it definitely means speaking on behalf of the student body on academic affairs issues. We come to a university to get an education, so that academic aspect is really important. It affects everything that we do here. It means working with Student Academic Senate, making sure it's an effective body, making sure it lobbies for students in the administration. It means releasing surveys. It means soliciting student feedback. That's in the SUA Constitution. That's what I believe.
And TS?
Yeah, I think largely true with a couple more caveats. I think, like Jeff said, it is largely about making sure that student voice is heard in academic spaces. Things like Academic Senate, we've recently reformed the Student Academic Senate this year for the first time. And I think that was a large step towards getting our voices heard again in academic spaces, but I think largely we've still been underrepresented in the Academic Senate space. And I think that given more time and more sort of voluntary conversations between the administration and us, I think we could reach a point where we were much more heard, because I think there are issues that students have brought to us that we haven't been able to deal with effectively because we can't get that dialogue going.
So, can you speak about, with regards to class availability, can you speak about what you're gonna, the main issues you think you see with class availability and what you're gonna do about them, starting with TS?
Okay. One of the largest issues with class availability, and this is one of the things you find out if you look at the data from the class survey, both last year and this year, is that really our current system is inefficient at its core. It's horribly, horribly inefficient, and it causes a large slew of problems. I think one of the things you find out is that almost a third of students take a class that they would drop could they get into a better class, which you have anecdotal evidence that there have been actual cases in which two people want to be in each other's class but can't get into it because it's full, which seems bizarre. Surely a system as educated as ours with access to as large and rich a database should be able to sort problems like that out. And I think if we can't expand teachers, we can't expand TAs, and really we can't at this point, though we wish we could, we have to fix that allocative efficiency, because otherwise we're just wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy to put people in the wrong classes.
And Jeffrey, can you speak on what you think first, and then maybe mention some of the points Tia's made, and see if you have different thoughts and why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I definitely think that the current system is inefficient. I think that there are students that need the classes, that they can't get into the classes they need because they're overcrowded. And I think that we need to have that system work such that the students that really need the classes can get into those classes, and the students that might not need to be in those classes, can maybe choose another class if it's like a GE, or if they need to graduate. I think that, it's a system that needs a lot of, is poor at allocating, it has poor allocative efficiency. Yeah, largely agree.
So what's something that you individually would propose to the academic senate to try and deal with this problem? Like a concrete example of like an idea. It doesn't have to be realistic. Well, it has to be realistic, but
And starting with, you started last time.
I think I did.
So Jeff?
Yeah, well, I think that it would mean that we present resolutions to the SUA on what we think about academic policy. It would mean that we present the evidence from the class survey, specifically those narratives, which are really important, because that means that we can't deny students as a statistic. I think that, it means really speaking to administrators and being assertive when we talk to them, saying that there are students that can't get these classes, and they really need to get them, and they're spending over a quarter. So I think that's what it takes. It means speaking to the appropriate administrators about the appropriate things, and making sure that we have clear, concrete goals when we speak to them.
Yes.
I think that's true, but I think partially it goes beyond that. I think talking to administrators is something we need to do, and I entirely agree with your point that students aren't just numbers, because we've had the numbers for years. Like you said earlier, the class survey is required by the Constitution. We've had those numbers that show the same problems we've had for year after year after year, and we've tried to open that dialogue and we can't. So I think when we go next year to administration, I think we have to have really concrete arguments together. Things like, for example, really actionable things. I think that we should ask them to try to improve server capability for the online system, because frankly I think it's a very predictable amount of load. I mean, students are released in bursts to go use the online system, and yet the server crashes almost every time, when that should be entirely preventable. So I think that's something we need to fix. I think, like I said earlier, the ability to have the system recognize that two people would like to be in each other's classes and immediately fix that, that's something I think would be relatively simplistic to do, as simplistic as working with that third-party company that runs the website, which I think will be the major disadvantage and difficulty in fixing the online system. I think that we could get those things done, and I mean that's why I think my platform has always been about those direct things that we could do now, and that, like Jeff said, we've known that these are problems forever, and it's time to fix it, because next year is to some extent a crisis, and I don't think you could discount that. It's time to do these things, and we can't wait any longer.
Jeff, any other comments on the?
Yeah, no, he mentioned a great thing about when enrollment occurs, and that you get these bursts of student activity on the website. Yeah, we definitely need to work on having the server capacity increased. And you also mentioned that next year is going to be a crisis. We're taking 600 more students. That's going to mean that we're going to have even more server crashes. We're going to have even more issues on the online system. So I think that's definitely what we need, something that we need to concentrate on.
So with the influx of students, they have proposed to change the class times. How do you think that will affect the students, and what will you do to fix it if you think that it's a problem?
Start with Tia.
Yeah, so I think, and we've discussed this at length in Student Academic Senate, I think there's a whole slew of issues that are going to come from that. We picked, after a lot of deliberation, the best plan we could, having one smaller extra course, a later course open in the night, and on some days, one extra earlier course in the morning. The problem with this is that the rest of our infrastructure isn't going to change to meet it. We're not going to have more buses run later at night or earlier, which prevents a serious safety issue with people having to walk home in the dark. I mean, there's no transportation that they can access at that point. Beyond that, we're going to have other issues, like we're already having difficulties getting teachers and TAs to accept time slots that are difficult to them, which, I mean, it's hard to hold against them because they are people and they just want to go back to their families, and it's hard to fault them for that, but it means that really it's sort of propounding this over-enrollment problem we have because we can't open those new slots. And so I think having those slots is what we need to do. I don't think we could get around it, but I think in the state that the plan is now, it's not necessarily going to solve everything. And I think that those other issues that we're going to have to fix to make it actually a functional system are something we need to address.
Jeff?
Well, I think that these class times and the fact that we're adding class times earlier, that class time is going to be starting earlier and it's going to be ending later, that's going to affect every aspect of student life on this campus. It affects mental health. It means students are going to have to stay later at the campus. It affects, as you said, the faculty. It affects because they won't want to take those later class times and some of those earlier class times. It'll mean that the quality of our education will decrease because that takes away time from each of the classes. And add that up over the course of the quarter and it adds up. It adds up to almost a full lecture. Yeah.
CS, any other comments on subject?
Yeah, I think just the main point is I think this isn't really a plan. This is a plan that I think was made out of necessity, but it's not a plan we're prepared to actually act on. And I think that's unfortunate because it's time for it.
So, I mean, it seems like you're both know it's something that's basically bound to happen. We can't really go against it. So what do you guys suggest to the student body to deal with this problem? It's going to happen. What are some concrete examples that you can tell the student body, okay, this is a problem, but this is ways that you as a person can work around them or make sure it doesn't impact you too negatively?
So start with Jeff.
Okay, so you're saying about the influx of new students, how we act concretely to improve the academic situation they have?
No, it's going off the other question about the time schedules, about how they're going to have later times and earlier times. And so we know that's going to affect students, whether it's transportation or health. So what are some tips that you would personally tell the students that they can do to try and work with that so it doesn't affect them too badly, I guess you could say?
Or you could also just talk about, not even just tips, talk about some concrete, because you both kind of said that there's a problem, which you're aware of. How are you going to fix that? And how are you going to work with students to make change happen? Starting with Jeff.
Well, I think that because it does affect every aspect of student life on this campus, we need to work with, the officers need to be united. We need to work as a team to see every aspect of how this is going to affect student life and speak and work with the appropriate administrators and see what we can do to impact that. As far as the tips that I'd give students, I don't quite know. I think that that's really something that we should be talking more about, that this is something that is sort of being imposed on students, and that's not really right.
Yes?
That's true. This is being imposed on students, but I think it's sort of a facile answer to just say that we're going to have to deal with it then, and we're going to have to work together and deal with administration, because that's true. Those are all things that we will always have to do. But I think in the end, we need to come up with things now that we can do, because we can't go in and figure out what's happening next year in the heat of the crisis. We need to figure out what we're doing now. We need to do things when we get to that issue with earlier times and later times. We need to do things like ensure that we make a stronger push to educate students about sleep hygiene, because frankly, that's a really important issue. I think it's so bad at this point that largely it is a joke. It is at times a very funny joke, but it is to this point something that I don't think we take seriously, and I think a lot of people don't realize how poorly it can impact their mental health, as Jeff mentioned earlier. I mean, those time slots could be a serious problem for people who need the rest in order to have the correct normal functioning. I think academics could take a hit. Sleep deprivation is terrible for cognitive capacity. I think that in the future, we just have to tell students that it is going to take willpower, it is going to take sacrifices. This is being imposed on us, and we didn't deserve it, but I don't think that that's an issue at this point. I think this is what's happening, and we need to be ready for it, and it's time to have ideas now and have concrete plans now, and it's time to act. And so, yeah, I think a push for students to be ready to act and to do those things that they don't necessarily want to do will be critically important.
Can you talk about maybe a different concrete solution that might be better for students? Do you think there's actually a way to make this
better? Or are we just going to have to deal with it as next year and fight it then? Starting with Jeff.
Okay, well, as T has mentioned, definitely we need to talk about, we need to definitely educate students on the ways that they can do self-care. We mentioned sleep hygiene. That's definitely something we can do. As for, you're saying that how we will improve the general student?
Can you give maybe a better solution to the class schedule that was proposed so far?
A better solution?
Well, something, rather than working with like the professors and working with the administration, how are you going to work with the students? Because they're the ones that are going to be dealing with this problem. So how will you outreach to the students, not the administration, to the students, to help them deal with this issue that they're going to face?
Well, definitely, educating, doing what we can, providing, the appropriate resources, pointing them to the appropriate resources. If there are services that need to have their times extended, have their times extended. See what we can do to make sure that those resources can be provided for students, whether they be mental health, improving food security on campus, students that are off campus staying longer times on campus because they might have classes that are that stay longer because their classes are farther apart and they can't eat on campus.
I think, frankly, yes, that is true, but I think it has to go beyond that. I think there is a point to which you can educate students, and I admit that in my last answer I did focus mainly on that. I'm sorry I cut it short because I was sort of running out of time and I felt bad. But I think I meant to get to more. You do have to go beyond educating students. That is something that I want to focus on. I don't want to take that back. It's true. But also, you have to go beyond that then, and you have to actually provide things for students. I think in the case of staying late and not being able to get home, something that has been brought up before, though it is kind of a moonshot idea, though I think if there's ever been a time for supporting moonshot ideas, it's probably now, because we have problems we need to solve. I think that perhaps providing a more adept ride-sharing system, potentially, because different people who are forced to stay later by this sort of wide-scale, increasingly late schedule, we might be able to provide things where people who have cars, which isn't everyone, could help each other get home, which I think would improve safety issues. It's not going to be an end-all be-all, but I think it would help. As for food security, I think that's an issue that's being largely handled by the IVP and that debate, but I think it is something that we will have to look at because, as Jeff pointed out, as schedules get later, that is going to be an academic issue because as academics increase, other things have to decrease. They lose time, they lose effort, and we are going to have to make up the difference because I think that is one of the critical responsibilities of the Vice President of Academic Affairs to ensure that academics are healthy and are not damaging students.
Oh, sorry. Do you have any other comments, Jeff?
I mean, no, I largely agree. I think that we need to provide those resources for students. I think that we need to do whatever we can to make sure that students can, that their academics aren't hurt, that they can come to, that they can come to school and be effective students, and that they don't get impacted, that their mental health isn't affected, that their sleep isn't affected,
With the large population of the student body being off campus, how will you increase the off-campus student involvement?
Starting with kids. Like, how we deal with off-campus, how we work with off-campus students.
Yeah, of course. This is a critical issue no matter what office you're in. Off-campus has always been an issue because when people are physically geolocated with you, it's easy to take them as the convenient resource. It's easy to get the most input from them. It's easy to provide the most from them. And I think that given that an equal amount of money is being contributed to our funds from people who live off campus and people who live on campus, I think that's a total disservice, frankly. And I think that a large part we need to focus more on services and methods of surveying that are not geocentric. I think the class survey being online is a good example of this, but not an excellent one, because advertising takes place mostly physically, not online. There is a mass email, but largely I think a lot of our draws from posters. Beyond that, I think student input from off-campus students isn't being heard as much as it should, like I mentioned earlier. I think that promoting there to be more submitting options online, maybe more of a social media push. I think integrating with services that are existing instead of trying to pioneer our own is something that could help us greatly in the future. Having more Facebook pages, I think our current ones are excellent, but they're a little too curated perhaps, or a little too open only to the people who look over them and not the people who really need to have a voice. I think having a place that students could go, especially off-campus students who aren't physically here, to speak and make their voices heard, need to have a place to type and make their voices heard, as cliche and a bit campy as that is. because I think that location shouldn't be an issue when we're all at the same level of students.
Jeff?
Yeah, no, I think that online is a great way to have off-campus students get involved. I think that we need to, I think that the off-campus issue is a large issue because we do have the great meadow that separates our campus from town. I think that we also need to think about the specific issues that affect off-campus students more, and providing for those providing resources for those students.
Do you have any other comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just would say again, I agree with most of the points made. I think, but largely, I think it is about having that concrete plan. And I think we can't figure things out once we get there. And I think maybe if we need to start some of those programs now, perhaps we have to. And I think that going forward, it's an issue that will extrapolate itself if we don't deal with it.
First generation students face unique problems from other students. What do you think is one of the most important obstacles that students face when opposed to allegate these problems?
Starting with, sorry, you want to ask?
Jeff, you can begin.
Okay, so we're talking specifically about first generation students. Well, I think that first generation students need to know the value. When we're talking about first generation students, we need to consider the fact that college is a bit new to them, and it's new in the sense that as a first generation student, I know that college was something that wasn't really familiar to me. It was something that cost my family a lot of money. It was something that was really a huge change in my life that no one was really familiar with. So I think that we need to speak to why would when we're speaking to to first generation students. We need to really get them involved in what an education is. I think one of the great things that we had was the Stevenson core courses and all the core courses. I think that the great questions that the core courses ask, it involves you in kind of why you're at a university, what you're asking the questions. How do we, there's also retention rates. We need to think about making sure that those students can stay and can continue their educations and can find value in their educations and can find their educations empowering and as a way to, get a better life for them. So I'd say.
Yes?
Well, I think that's true. I think that saying that sort of teaching them the education and how what education should mean to them and sort of using the core courses to instill those values, I think that's sort of in a way forcing them to close a gap that I don't think it's really their responsibility to close. I think largely the issues that they face, I think in my mind there are three main issues. I'd say the language barrier obviously is one for students who are first generation students, especially as I'm mainly focusing on international students, because I think that language barrier, it prevents you from, which I think was going to be enough, we shouldn't expect them to reach out to us. And I think that until we start providing those materials, we start publishing in multiple languages, we start ensuring that everyone knows about what events are happening and we're not just preaching to the choir and telling the people who are going to come anyway. I think that the people who are not largely involved in our sort of culture of the society of the school now aren't going to be included, and I think that'll be a flaw.
Jeff, any final or any comments on the subject?
Well, no, I'm glad that we mentioned international students because that, the fact that you're coming to a new country and you're experiencing a completely different, a culture that might be very strange to you, and that, that it's hard enough to find a sense of a community on a campus as large as ours. So, yeah, definitely reaching out to those students, definitely publishing things in different languages, the languages that those international students would speak. Definitely, reaching out to them and providing events specifically for those students from those communities. As there already is, but I think that we could increase that. As far as
So building off of that, with more students coming in next year, a lot of the study rooms are being changed into bedrooms, and so if some of these students, as you guys have mentioned, maybe need more help to get a community with colleges, how will you ensure that they have the study space if a lot of it is being shut down and the libraries closed early? How will you make sure that they're getting that help that you guys say they need?
TS first.
Yeah, I think nothing, frankly, I think it's a largely overlooked issue. I think nothing will hurt our student body next year like the closure of those lounges and those study spaces. I think on a personal, close to your life level, that's going to destroy a lot of the social relationships that you could have built. I mean, as a freshman, I wouldn't have a third the friends that I do now if I hadn't had that lounge and that community to be a part of. I don't think I maybe might not have even been pulled into student government. I might not be sitting here today. So frankly, I think ensuring that we have spaces, that we open up more spaces, that we start reserving spaces that will remain there, like the Fireside Lounge, the Cultural Center, both at Merrill and in other colleges. I think it's important that if we're going to lose those spaces, we have to make an equivalent push to open new spaces. Earlier, in the prior debate to this one, there was a mention of opening hours in libraries, earlier and later. I think that is critically important because as students are displaced, as they don't have anywhere to go, their academics will be hurt, and beyond that, their social situation will be hurt, which will feed back into their academics. I think that could be really, really bad. I think that could really hurt students. And I think it hasn't been talked about, it hasn't been discussed, there's no plan to open new spaces. Frankly, I'm not sure we have the money to open new spaces. I think our only option is to extend the hours of the places we already have, because at this point, what else are we going to do?
Well, UCSC was founded with the idea of living, learning communities. You know, that we had sections that took place in the lounges. The lounges, you know, are social places, and they're educational places. The fact that they're closing is a great loss to students. We need to talk about the recreational spaces and preserve recreational spaces for students because they need it. They need, you know, a bit of a relaxer. I mean, of course we need study spaces as well. And as much as, you know, I think that it can be potentially harmful to some of the mental health of students, it's concerning about the student staff that will have to work in these libraries. I think that we need to increase the library hours. I don't think that students should pay for it. I think that this is something that's being imposed by the administration. And, you know, the statewide administration, the administration at UCSC, and it should be the administration that finds the money to pay for those things. I also think that as far as study spaces, that the college library should be open. And as far as finding a sense of community, I think that the core courses are really important. And that's why I'm frightened by the fact that there is a proposal on the ground to decrease the core courses to 2 or 3 unit classes that you take in your fall quarter. There's a council provost proposal to have them to be 2 quarters long, and that really provides a foundation for students. Find students that find, you know, that had only small classes in high school and may find college to be very frightening because you have large lectures. It's very impersonal. So having those longer core courses and having them be meaningful to students, and, you know, having college events. Having events that, you know, you can help build these smaller communities in the larger campus community. I think the colleges are very good at that. I think the colleges are really central to something at UCSC, and right now all they do is separate students, and that's not what they should be doing. And I know for a fact, because I've looked at the documents, that's not what they were trying to do when they were trying to create the college system.
Yeah, so if I'm not going too much on topic, can I talk on the core courses for a second?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. I think I would see the same issue, exactly the same issue. The college system, I think, right now is largely just a divisive product. I think partially, to a limited extent, that is a good thing. It allows you at the end, this is a qualified answer. At first, I think it does allow you
We're back. We are back.
Welcome back.
Sorry about that, viewers, if you're still there. We are...
Can you see the number of viewers over there?
Not from here. Oh god, I almost said power off on accident.
If you're still
Alright, starting.
Third time's a charm. We're back with our newscasters.
hello.
I
Welcome.
think Jeff's cup really helps with the newscaster thing. But you have to hold it backwards because you don't have to drink from it. You just hold it for like.
Your news today.
Welcome to Jeff and Tia's in the morning, in the afternoon. Today, we find out that the bridge has collapsed, but luckily, a smaller bridge was directly under it, ready to catch it. Jeff?
7-Eleven was a part-time job.
Political humor. That's what we're here for.
Do you have a news thingy, Mabob?
Yeah, we do.
We have like, we can talk later.
Anyway,
Anyway.
who's got next question?
So, after our unexpected intermission, how do you plan to work on retention of students of color and marginalized groups?
We'll start with Jeff.
Okay. Well, in the past years, SUA had a relationship with E Squared, Engaging Education, and those different communities that were underneath E Squared. So that's talking about the Big Five. We need to really rebuild that relationship. We need to, provide them the resources. I think that we need to provide a platform for those communities to speak on behalf of them. For them to speak on behalf of themselves. It's not my job to speak on behalf of them, but I can provide all the resources that I can to make sure that their voices are heard. Because retention, I believe that education should be a fundamentally liberating experience, and we shouldn't have an educational system that fails people that have been historically underrepresented. So that's, it's all about rebuilding the relationships and, really providing all the resources that we can and communicating with the underrepresented communities that are being affected. And they'll present different solutions to us, and we need to be able to work with those communities and to have those solutions that affect those, that will help those particular communities.
That's true. The dialogues have stopped between a bunch of groups. The Vice President of Academic Affairs next year could fix that, and I think this is how. We could essentially rebuild the bridges between both the Office of Academic Affairs that represents student academics, including those of underrepresented students, who want their academics to more reflect their view and their backgrounds. And I think that we need to first rebuild that dialogue between the groups that, like EE, that E Squared, that empower those students. And then we also need to equally rebuild the dialogue between the students at large and those groups, because I think, frankly, if those small groups are still the only ones, they're not going to have the power and the weight and the resources that they need to actually bring up those actionable ideas that we can put through the Office of Academic Affairs, through the SUA, and move things into actual physical change that will increase the livelihood of our underrepresented students.
Yeah. No, definitely. We need to have those students. We need to provide all the resources we can have to have those students. Help them organize. Help them really see. Provide them the resources to work on behalf of their own. On behalf of these communities. And that involves having the campus-wide community understand that these issues need to be at the forefront of everyone's mind. Because a university that doesn't support all of its students is failing as a university.
So you both talked about having the students meet with administration and helping them out with all this type of stuff. How are you going to get the students to be involved in this? Not just telling them like, oh, come to this. Like, how are you going to ensure that they know that you guys are reaching out to them?
Starting with
I think Jeff started last time.
Matthias. Yeah.
Okay. I think that this is an issue, as a lot of these issues about dialogue stopping are about weight. I think that people don't understand both the weight that they're under, that are causing the problems that they experience, and the weight that they have to push back. So I think, and that's a little bit sort of vapid, so I'll put it in more concrete terms. I think really we need to find the students who have those issues. There are issues like majors like Black Studies being underrepresented, non-existent at our school. Despite a fairly large demand for it, enough that we could feasibly start a division in order to run it. And so I think we need to find the students that have those issues. I think this is how you really fix anything where a dialogue is stopped. You find the students who have those issues. You find the people who have been waiting in the wings to try to fix those issues but haven't been able to find the students who have the passion. You bring them together. Then you use, because this is one of the largest powers that any of the vice presidents of SUA has, to basically almost not quite demand, but have a lot of clout in getting meetings with administration. So once you have the students who have the problems, you have the groups who have the passion, you have you who has the connections, and you have admin who have the power, you bring those four together and you actually get something done. And I think with that we could serve a lot of the problems that have been concerns of underrepresented students, like they're not being the majors that they want, like institutional discrimination, that I think though we are a progressive-minded institution, I don't know that that always really manifests itself as truly a reformative school. And I think that once we get all those people together, and I mean physically together and talking, and in sort of a positive way, not an argument, I think that things will change. And I think that lack of weight is what has led to where we are now.
Yeah, I think that academic programs are great for helping to represent these students. I think that programs that support the student voice need to be supported. I think that we're talking about critical race and ethnic studies. We're talking about the non-existent programs that don't exist, or African and Black studies. I think that we're talking about also Asian studies. and community studies, and journalism, and all those different programs that support the student voice. And actually, I mean, it's really concerning to me that this university for a while had community studies go away. You know, that's how you get students involved in the community. That's how you get students really active in the world. And, you know, finding ways that they can actually organize to improve their, supporting those academic programs, as well as providing those students with the organizational clout, and being as a VPAA that can provide them that administrative space where they can speak with that. You know, I think that those things definitely work together.
Just any more comments?
I think all that's been said on this matter, probably. Unless I can speak more, but I think in the interest of time, I could also not speak more.
What do you think is the best way to reach students and get their opinions?
Starting with Jeff.
To get students, to get the student opinions, well, I think it begins with speaking to the students. You know, everything begins with, you know, directly speaking to students. Part of what the VPAA's constitutional duties is to you know, have these feedback, to have feedback from students about academic affairs issues. But in general, you know, that means that we have surveys that are effective at capturing students. It means that those surveys have narratives involved in them. That means that we have, you know, the statistics, but we also have in-depth descriptions of the experiences that students have. That's really important because that improves, that those are really what we can present to administration and say that, you know, this is how students are feeling. You know, so, you know, definitely, of course, having open office hours, but also reaching out to students. So, you know, that means having, you know, reaching out to students online, coming to different spaces, coming to spaces that you might feel uncomfortable in, and, you know, talking to students about the academic affairs issues and all the other issues that they face on campus, and going into those spaces and speaking with them. It means that, you know, speak to the student leaders on campus, and see what, you know, they're seeing in their own communities.
I think that's all good and well, but I think it sort of misses the point. I think having a narrative section is something we already do. It's something you can do, and it does allow for a very, you know, wide range of varied response that maybe picks up on things that we weren't looking for, which is important. But I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue with what you asked, which is, you know, how do you make sure that student voices are collected and heard? The issue isn't our basket. It's not our survey. It's not our collection method. It's that we're not really delivering that to students, especially, and I mentioned this earlier when we talked about off-campus students, geocentrism is a huge issue. Where you stand, if you're going to physically, as Jeff said, go to spaces, which I don't think is the solution here, where you stand will determine what answers you get, and what answers you get will determine what your policies are. And that means that everyone who you didn't stand near hasn't had their voice heard. So I think, as I said earlier, we need to have a larger push to integrate with online, not geolocated practices like social media, a Facebook page where more people could talk, where more people could be heard, where it wouldn't be curated, is critical. I think that we have the internet and we're not really using the internet, and at this point, I think where you live should not be an issue in who can hear you when you yell.
Yeah, so as having those voices heard, that means that we have to, you know, provide the resources for students to really organize on a grassroots level. It means that we have students that, you know, have these it means that we can have these students, it means that we can point these students to the appropriate resources. Yeah.
So, lots of decisions made by the academic senate do not actually make it to students. For example, not many people are aware that the C- grade is a thing. Could you talk more about how you're gonna get that to students and how you're gonna get kind of re-bolster the connection between academic senate and the students? Starting with.
Oh, I thought it was Jeff, but we can go either way. I'm happy with it.
No, because Jeff he started.
Yeah.
So you start.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a huge issue. This is an issue that is so large that I think a lot of our administration in the past hasn't really been able to deal with it. I think the problem that you're addressing is a problem that I think faces everyone. It's essentially that there isn't this follow-through, like I mentioned earlier. It doesn't move from those students who need things to those people, the administration, and we are meant to be the conduit. And I don't know that we act as the conduit. I think largely right now we're acting as a body that exists in a bubble that largely makes decisions that then return information to itself that never really interact with the students as a whole. And I think yes, it's difficult. There are a lot of students, and it's difficult to get to them. And things like, as you just said, as part of the question, Academic Senate. When Academic Senate comes out with something, it comes to us. The Office of Academic Affairs knows about it, the Student Academic Senate, which has just been recreated, now knows about it. But students never really know about it. And I think that that issue is largely, going back to the last question, an issue of geocentrism. I think we are physically sitting in those spaces where we will hear that information, and that means that we're privileged to hear it. I knew that C- is no longer a passing grade, but once a week I run into someone who thinks that they're going to pass a class that they're going to fail. And the fact that that information never got to them is frankly ridiculous, because that's a massive decision that could have hugely overarching issues on their everyday academic life. And so I think to come up with a solution to that very large, difficult to comprehend issue, I think that it's the same solution as how do you hear students? How do you talk to students? How do you hear students? It's the same thing. You need to have services that students can access that aren't about whether you're in student government, they aren't about your level of privilege, they aren't about your level of experience, they're just about that you're a student here and you need information, and that information will get to you. And so I think a push to be on services that students can access from anywhere, that don't need to be forced upon them, is critical. So more online, more emails if necessary. It's a little bit spammy, but they need to know.
Yeah, well, I think that the most immediate thing that you can do is definitely making sure that the report backs occur in all the college spaces, but that doesn't really address the bubble issue. It does mean that we need to go online. It does mean that we need to send more emails. Something that I've noticed is that, how do we really need to make sure that the students that we have know the impact that the issue, that the Academic Senate has on their life. There are some students that there are a number of students that don't know that Academic Senate exists and that it makes these pressing decisions, such as the C- grade, such as removing narrative evaluations, such as removing the language of narrative evaluations. So it's about really, it's about speaking with students. It's about getting students involved and seeing the pressing nature of these, seeing what really affects them about them. It's more than just informing. It's also showing that it's pressing.
Yes, any more comments?
I think the question has been answered. If you think that the question has been answered, I think going further would make this into more of a values conversation and less of a solution conversation.
Historically, SUA officers have been accused of rubbing elbows with administration. Do you think it is an officer's duty to advocate to the administration, or do you think it's their duty to rally students and show support via connecting to the student body and creating things like rallies and stuff like that to lobby administration rather than doing it individually one-on-one?
Starting with Jeff?
Yeah. I think it's absolutely the duty of SUA to work with, not just speak with administration, but at times to really stand up, united as a student body, to organize the student body and to organize the student body to come forward to the administration through through rallies, through marches, through all forms of direct action. I think that's really important. I think that grassroots organizing, I think that getting student action involved is really important. In 2001, that's when the narrative evaluations came up for the first time. Not for the first time, but they came up in the academic sense, and 1,000 students showed up to the meeting. They stood outside with signs. That's really important, and it meant that we kept the narrative evaluations for another 10 years. It meant that we were able to get them, though admittedly, in addition to grades. But we noticed is that 10 years later, is that it was just a whimper. The narrative evaluations went away without anyone really caring. The Commission of Academic Affairs didn't make a point that this is something that really personalized our education, though it was problematic. Yeah. So I think that it is at the forefront of your responsibility as an SUA officer to organize students, to make sure that when your voices aren't being heard by the administration, that you can have that leverage power by organizing students as a mass, as a body.
I would say I'm not sure that was quite the question. I think your question, if I'm correct, was more about whether it should be about communicating with administration, which is seen by a lot of students as sort of being a little too much on that side, or if it should be more about acting with the students to sort of move en masse towards the administration. Is that the correct question? Sorry, I want to make sure I understand it before I answer.
No.
Okay, could you repeat it? What?
Yeah, so SUA officers have historically been accused of rubbing elbows with administration by being the only ones in the room with them. Is it an SUA officer's job to advocate to the administration one-on-one, or should they be bringing the entire student body in?
Okay, of course, I see your question now. Okay, yeah, I think that This is a difficult issue because I think it is largely a bit of a catch-22. I mean, there's both sides to it. If you start to favor the administration more, then you have to stop listening to some of the students, because I think that the administration does have values that they are very, very attached to and that they will cling to. And I think that acting one-on-one with those administration does mean that you become a little deaf, and that's not a solution. On the other hand, and this is unfortunate, I think this is a failure of our administrative system, if you start trying to organize something with students, I think there's a knee-jerk reaction that's happened in the past with a lot of the resolutions that have happened this year, where as soon as administration sees, students starting to be passionate about something, they don't want to listen anymore. I don't think they are responsive to things like that, and I think that that is an equally large problem. So I think the catch-22 of it is that to some degree you have to do both. You have to be able to ensure that students stay as passionate as they are now, because apathy will kill us more than anything will. If we can't have people talking about the problems, they will never get fixed. They will stay there, they will stagnate, they will get worse. And I think that you do have to talk to administration, because that's what we are. We're a conduit. I mean, we have the access to administration, and we have, though I think we are still largely ignored, which I think is a huge problem. I think that we need to be able to bring those students who are passionate physically to the room of the administration. I think administration should allow us to do that, because I don't think that the student government should be a device to allow administration to only have to talk to and deal with a couple students. It should be something that forces them to talk to more students. And I think that that is the failing, that we haven't quite been representing students so much as we've been putting up an extra buffer between administration. It's not our fault, it's not what we tried to do, but it's what we've become. And I think until we change that, we're not serving students.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that we need the administration to, we need student voices to be communicated to the administration, and for the administration to communicate with us as a whole student body, not just as SUA officers, not just as SUA, not just as students involved in student government. I think that one of the ways that you can do that as an academics, through academic affairs, is definitely getting those student liaisons that we have sitting on those committees to really, speak out to the student body. I think that means getting them more involved in Student Academic Senate by amending the bylaws to require them to attend some of the Academic Senate meetings, the Student Academic Senate meetings that we hold. I think that that's how you get more voices, that's how you get more students informed, that's how you get more students in contact with some of the administrative decisions. And yeah, we need,
Is there any more audience questions? If not, we'd love to hear your final remarks, starting with Matthias.
Okay. I would say next year is unfortunately not the time. This is largely what's in my candidate statement, if you go read it. Next year is not going to be the time to look forward 4, 5, 6, 7 years into the future. I wish it was, but it isn't. Next year is the time to sort of batten down the hatches, to look at the things that we need to fix and to get them fixed, because if we don't, that crisis is going to spiral out of control. I think we have a lot of resources. I think they're being underused, and I think we need to put them in front of the things that affect students every day. I also think that we need to listen to students, because there are going to be problems we don't know about now, and I think that that's easy to say and it's much harder to do. And if elected, I will. And I will also fix the things like chairs. I want people to have a place to sit, and online enrollment, because your server shouldn't crash when you expect X amount of students to go on it. And I will get those things fixed, and I will listen to students. And those are my only promises, and they are the ones I'm making, and they are the ones I will keep.
Yeah, so next year is going to be hectic. We're going to take a lot more students. All our resources are going to be stretched. I think, though, that we do need to think long-term. I think that we need to look at the way that this is affecting UCSC as a whole. And I think that we need to think about campus development in the way that, what it means to have a university that used to have 6% of classes have 90 or more students in them, and emphasize, really, a small college atmosphere, an atmosphere where you could know your professor, to being a university where impersonality is the norm. So I think that undeniably we need to think about what's going to happen in the upcoming years, and how the system-wide impact that we have on UCSC with taking these new students, with having the cuts on transportation at the same time, with having all our resources stretched, are affecting UCSC in the long term, in the next several years as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and coming to this debate, audience and candidates. Thank you. Guys' hands will stay here, so if you have any questions you want to ask them, feel free to. Thanks so much. And you two are free. Free to.
This is gonna. Like you're not hitting. You're not getting like 30 lane truck.